This is Führer Directive Number 21, one of the most momentous and terrifying documents of the 20th century. It is not just a plan for an invasion, it is a death warrant for tens of millions of people. This is the official order for Operation Barbarossa. In the summer of 1941, Adolf Hitler launched this, his long-awaited invasion of the Soviet Union. History remembers it as an epic strategic blunder, an act of hubris that led directly to the destruction of Nazi Germany. But was it truly a mistake in the mind of its architect? To understand why Hitler believed this catastrophic war was not just an option, but an absolute necessity, we must journey into the dark heart of his ideology and the desperate reality of Germany's strategic position. Hitler's obsession with the East was not a sudden impulse, it was the central pillar of his entire worldview. In his autobiography, Mein Kampf, he laid out his belief that history was a brutal, perpetual struggle for survival, a battle where the superior Aryan race must dominate the inferior. He was haunted by what he called the Jewish world conspiracy, and he saw Soviet communism, or Judeo-Bolshevism, as its ultimate expression. The conquest of the Soviet Union was, in his mind, Germany's destiny. This was the concept of Lebensraum, or living space, the creation of a vast Germanic empire in the East that would grant Germany the resources it needed to become a true world power. This desire for Eastern expansion was not a new idea in Germany. During the First World War, with Russia collapsing into revolution, the German military had seized vast territories in Poland, the Baltic states, and Ukraine. Under the military administration known as Oberost, German commanders like Hindenburg and Ludendorff began to treat this land as a colonial possession, to be economically exploited, and its people Germanized. These grand plans were cut short by Germany's defeat in the West in 1918, but the dream of a German empire in the East lived on in right-wing circles, waiting for a leader ruthless enough to try again. Hitler saw himself as the heir to this legacy, destined to finish the job that the Kaiser's generals had started. But this grand, genocidal vision was built upon a foundation of deep-seated fear. In the early 20th century, Germany was not the economic powerhouse of today. While its industry was strong, a huge portion of its population still worked on small, inefficient peasant farms, half as productive as those in Britain. Hitler was acutely aware of this economic weakness. He looked with a strange mix of hatred and envy towards the United States. On one hand, he saw it as a decadent nation controlled by Jewish finance. On the other, he was fascinated by its story. The American Wild West became his model for what he dreamed of for Germany in the Wild East of the Soviet Union. The endless grain fields and vast natural resources that made America rich were, to him, the only solution to Germany's own cramped, vulnerable position in Europe. Just as America had fulfilled its destiny by expanding westward, Germany's was fated to play out in the East at the expense of the Slavic peoples he deemed Untermensch, subhuman. This long-held obsession was ignited into a raging fire by the crisis of 1940. The stunning victory over France, which should have secured Germany's dominance, had become a strategic nightmare. The British, backed by the colossal economic power of the United States, refused to surrender. The British naval blockade was starving German-occupied Europe of food, oil, and coal. The German war machine was now responsible for a vast empire, and its lack of resources had become critical. In a grim irony, the only thing keeping Germany afloat was an alliance with the one country Hitler was determined to destroy. As part of the 1939 Nazi-Soviet pact, a steady flow of Soviet grain and oil fueled the German war effort. Hitler was becoming dependent on his mortal enemy, a situation he found intolerable. To break this dependence, war was the only option, and it had to come soon. From the moment he took power, Hitler had transformed the German economy into a machine built for conflict. Between 1932 and 1938, military spending skyrocketed from less than 1% of GDP to over 20%. This aggressive rearmament gave Germany a crucial head start, allowing for the early victories in Poland and France. But Hitler knew his advantage was temporary. This aggression had sparked a global arms race. By 1941, British and American factories were beginning to churn out tanks and aircraft at a rate Germany could not hope to match. British aircraft production, supplemented by American Lend-Lease, was already double that of Germany's. The window of opportunity, while the Wehrmacht was still the best equipped and most experienced army in the world, was closing fast. He had to strike before the economic might of his enemies rendered his military advantage obsolete. Time was running out. The conquest of the Lebensraum he craved, and the resources he desperately needed had to happen now. But the conquest of the land was not enough. To make use of the fertile plains of Ukraine, the existing populations had to be dealt with. Thus, the invasion was inextricably linked to three of the most horrific programs of mass murder ever conceived. The first was the final solution, the extermination of 6 million European Jews. The second, the General Plan Ost, was a master plan for the ethnic cleansing of Eastern Europe, calling for the removal and effective destruction of over 30 million Slavic people to make way for German settlers. The third pillar of this genocidal plan was the Hunger Plan. Developed by high-ranking Nazi officials, it was a cold and calculated blueprint for mass starvation. It provided for the ruthless seizure of all Soviet agricultural output, redirecting it to feed the German army and the German home front. The plan explicitly acknowledged and accepted that this would deny food to the local Soviet population, leading to their deaths. Nazi leaders like Hermann Göring and Herbert Backe spoke openly of the systematic starving to death of 20 to 30 million Soviet citizens as a necessary and intended outcome of the program. Over 2 million captured Soviet prisoners of war would be among the first to die this way. For Hitler, the extermination of these populations was not a monstrous side effect of the war. It was the absolute precondition for achieving his vision. Without their deaths, the land could not be used, and his dream of a global superpower, ready to defeat the empires of the US and Britain, would be impossible. So, was Operation Barbarossa a mistake? From a military and strategic standpoint, it was a catastrophe born of arrogance and racism. But in the twisted logic of Adolf Hitler, it was not a mistake. It was the final, desperate gamble he believed he had to take. It was the convergence of his deeply held ideological crusade with an urgent economic crisis. It was, in his mind, the only path to securing Germany's survival and its rightful place in the sun. The invasion of the Soviet Union was not just a campaign, it was the terrible, logical endpoint of the entire Nazi project. Understanding the dark motivations behind the most terrible decisions in history is crucial to ensuring they are never repeated. If you find these deep dives into the complexities of the past valuable, please help our channel continue this work by subscribing and clicking the notification bell.